Welcome to the bottom line. Today, joining me right now is Thomas Erb Jr., the owner of Erb Legal LLC, known throughout Northeast Ohio for his relentless advocacy and high ethical standards. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Morning, Ryan. It's great to be here.
I want to dive right in. This is a topic that I'm quite curious about, and I would always recommend that people reach out to an expert like yourself with these types of important questions. So I want to get right to the bottom line. When someone is facing a family law matter, what should they look for in an attorney? It's a personal thing. So what should they try to find?
Well, I think the most important question to ask when you're interviewing attorneys to represent you in a case is how much of your practice is devoted to the area of law that you are seeking from that attorney. And so, for instance, I'm a family law attorney here in Ohio. If the attorney's not doing more than 60% of their practice in the family law field, you probably should find somebody who's doing at least 60% or more. You wouldn't want somebody who's tried one murder case to be representing you if your life is on the line. The same thing goes for a family law attorney. You really need to have someone who's familiar with the court procedures, how things go, the rules, and that's the best way to guide somebody through it.
I really like your point there. It's find somebody that's got a good history in that exact area, right? It's I like that you used the murder case as an example. It's a very big extreme, but it's a good way to kind of set that playing field and make it really obvious, right? You want to find somebody who's got the experience, who understands how to navigate the complexities, not just in the legal sense, but in the personal, emotional sense, right? So leads me to another question. What are some of the common red flags people often overlook when hiring legal counsel?
I think the first thing people should start when they're doing their research is to look into the Google reviews of the firm. That will give you some key insights into potential problems that attorney has had in the past, especially their negative reviews. So if you see a lot of negative reviews or very few reviews of that attorney, that means that there are probably some issues in there that you might want to bring up. It doesn't necessarily disqualify them from representing you, but I would certainly make that my first line of questioning if I was interviewing that attorney. For instance, if they have a couple of reviews that say I can never get a hold of my attorney, I can't get a call back, he never answers my emails, that could be an outlier. It could be a pattern that the attorney has problems doing that. And you certainly don't want somebody handling your case who doesn't respond to you. We have white glove service here. You call me, I'm getting back to you within 24 hours unless I've lost a leg in the ocean. So you want to talk to somebody and you want to ask those questions when you're researching. And really, you shouldn't hire the first attorney that you interview. You should interview a couple of attorneys and ask these type of questions and sort of get a feeling for who your own personality might mesh with. Some attorneys' personalities might mesh better than yours with your personality.
I think that's a really good point, and it's kind of funny because reviews are so overlooked. Yeah, I would say you're right on the money with that. I mean, even in my field, right before I work with a client as a consultant or before I go to a restaurant, whatever it may be, I'm not really good in the personal life of using those reviews. My wife, on the other hand, my goodness, anywhere we go, she's digging into the reviews to see what kind of experience we can expect, right? And I think when it comes to legal sense, I wouldn't have thought of, hey, let me look at the reviews, but I think that's a probably a pretty good way to identify some of the consistent issues or just the overall quality of that legal counsel you would receive, right? Sometimes you got people out there that will make a very small, they'll turn a molehill into a mountain, for lack of a better way to put it. But what are some questions that should really, what questions should someone ask a potential attorney before hiring them to really understand what they're getting into?
Well, besides the ones that I already mentioned, I think you really want to ask them what their familiarity is with the local court that they're practicing in. We only operate in about 3 or 4 counties here in Northeast Ohio pretty consistently. And, there's an old joke: a good lawyer knows the law, a great lawyer knows the judge, right? That doesn't necessarily mean you're out drinking with the judge or playing golf with the judge. But if you're in front of the judge enough that you know how she's going to rule on certain issues, you can advise your client and let them know, hey, here's how she's going to rule on this particular issue if we have a trial, or at least this is how I think she's going to rule. Obviously, you don't know for sure, but if you've taken her temperature enough on the same issues over and over and over again, you're going to kind of know how she looks at the area of the law, what she expects, and what she expects to be presented. And it makes a real difference when we get people that come in from out of town and they don't know the judge and they're expecting, you know, well, this is the way we do spousal support in our county. It's totally different county by county. And if you don't know what you're doing, you could be selling your client down the river. That's a super important question. Second important question would be, how do you handle your case? Okay. Are you a super aggressive person? Are you more of a, you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar type person? That's really important to flesh out at the very beginning of your representation. We have lots of people that ask me, Tom, I want you to be super aggressive in my case. And that's fine. I have that ability to do that. However, once you go the super aggressive route, it is really, really hard to then pull that back, pull those reins in, and try and resolve a case. So generally, I like to start out with the honey to try and get the case resolved so that the clients can move on with their life. A lot of people think of divorce as revenge, right? But it's not about revenge. It's about resolution. It's about what's in the best interest of your children. You really want to put their focus first, and not I have to get every last dollar from my ex, in order to separate. If you can put your time with your children as a priority, if you have children involved with your divorce, you're going to be much better off in the end.
Man, you dropped some serious gold nuggets right there, and I've got to highlight just some of the wisdom you put in that. And one thing in particular I didn't even think about is the already relationship that could already be developed between the judge and the legal counsel. Didn't even think about that. It's just like working with a boss or a client. Over time, you get used to how they operate, the way they think, the way they react or respond to certain situations. I would say that's a really important dynamic to have and to understand. If you've got legal representation that already has a relationship with a judge or at least understands them a little bit, yeah, there's a lot of benefit to that. I think that's really, really big. Second, I'm gonna go off a beaten script here. I agree with you. It seems like a lot of divorce in situations like that almost look like a way to get revenge, to attack each other, to get the leg up, to make a statement where I like the way you think. I really do. And it kind of hit some of my core aspect there where it's finding resolution, right? It's finding a way to still take care of the kids, to make sure everyone wins, no one loses. Not every separation divorce has to be this nasty bloodbath, so to say. It can be resolved in a amicable manner with some heart, right? Is kind of a good way to put it. So that makes me wonder, why do you do this? What is that piece of fulfillment you get out of doing this?
Well, I think I chose family law mostly because you get to work with people in a very challenging time of their life. A lot of people cry in my office. There's a lot of emotions, and you get to help them through that. And see, over the years, I've seen a lot of kids, grow up. Clients have had to come back multiple times, and clients will bring their children into the office, and I'm just like, wow, it's sometimes shocking to see how much they've grown since I first started representing them, however many years ago it was. And it's certainly a more challenging area of the law than many other areas of the law because it touches on so many other areas of the law. There's bankruptcy considerations, there's real estate considerations, there's ERISA, stuff that comes into play if you're dividing 401ks or state pension systems or really any kind of pension system, military pensions. You got to be involved with, federal law. So it crosses a large swath of different areas of law. And so you really got to know what you're doing when you get into this. A lot of times we get a lot of agreements that other attorneys have drafted, and I read them and I instantly know that this person has never done family law before because they miss vast swaths of information that needed to be included to protect not only their own client, but really the other party as well. And it takes a lot more money to fix something after it's already been done than to do it right the first time. And see, that's the key. Do it right the first time. You're going to save yourself a ton of money in the long run. There won't be as much confusion as to when parenting time is, and we really try and lock all of that stuff down. If you just say father gets visitation Monday and Tuesday, well, what times on Monday and Tuesday? And so it causes a lot of consternation and a lot of grief for the children who don't really know, when I'm supposed to be with dad, when I'm supposed to be with mom.
Ooh, I that right there, I think is really key. There's some vital stuff that I think even I wasn't really thinking about, and you're also highlighting just how little knowledge I have in this field, and it's great. I grew up and my parents separated, and there were some times where it was nasty or it was chaotic, but all in all, they did have the vision of making sure we were taken care of and we came first. They still were, how would you say, cordial and able to still interact with each other, but there was definitely times where it could have gone crazy really fast. And I'm loving this information you're providing because it's giving me a whole different look on the way I would ask questions to legal representation, to an attorney, to find who it is that I would want to represent me and my family through a very tough time like this. So I'm excited to keep this conversation going. So if you guys are enjoying this conversation, I recommend go refill your coffee, grab a pen and pad, because we're going to have a whole nother segment with Mr. Thomas here, and this is going to get wild. We'll be right back on the bottom line.